So today we're going to be talking about animal tracks and signs. These are all a very good way for us to understand what is exactly out there as we make our way into our sit spot and or out into the Cardigan Wild. We'll be looking for not only the footprints that we find, but we'll be looking for other signs that will help us to identify all the little critters that are out there with us. So the next slide that we're going to be talking about is on tracks and trails. A track is a single print made by an animal, whereas a trail is a set of tracks made by an animal. You can see this demonstrated in the pictures below. The one on the left shows you two deer tracks. They show you that the deer is probably walking pretty slowly as the prints are very, very close together. The picture in the middle demonstrates a run, which is a type of trail where deer have traveled that area consistently over a period of time. It actually leaves a little trail behind. And then the one on the right demonstrates the difference when you have different types of activities. You can actually show the course of the animal. This is a mink in this case. And you can see that the distance increases when an animal is running as opposed to when the prints are very close together. Tracks can then tell you how fast that animal is moving, and then it's also its behavior, where it's traveling, what it's looking for, perhaps food, perhaps shelter, perhaps water. So on this slide, we're going to be looking at common tracks. On the top, we have felines, and on the bottom, we have canines. Now, felines are your kitty cats. We have the 4 toe pads, as you can see in the picture, without the claws, because cats can actually retract their claws. This would go for mountain lions or lynx or some other wild type of feline, as well as your kitty cat at home. The canines have 4 pads as well, but they actually have claws visible, as you can see in the bottom left diagram. They are not able to retract their claws, and so in their prints and their tracks, you'll be able to see them. In this slide, you can see the difference between a moose track and a deer track. Both are hoofed animals, so you can see each side of the hoof in the picture. The difference between moose and deer, however, is the split track for the moose is about 4 to 7 inches long, and the deer is about 1.5 to 3 inches long. So if you were to use a ruler, you'd be able to determine which was your moose and which was your deer. So using quantitative measurements is always helpful in your observations. This slide demonstrates some other tracks that we might see along the trail. We have American black bear. You can see the large pads for the black bear, as well as some of the claws that are in the mud there. The middle diagram is showing you American beaver. You can see sort of a webbed looking track. And then on the top right we have raccoon. Raccoon have splayed toes, and they also have claws that are visible. These are all identifiable by their prints. Now we're going to move on to scat and urine. Scat are defined as the droppings left by animals. You're going to look for size, shape, consistency, and also undigested food, fur, or feathers that are in the scat. Carnivores typically have tubular droppings, as you can see on the left-hand side. Coyote droppings are tubular in nature, and they oftentimes contain fur and even sometimes skeletal pieces. Herbivores, however, usually have pellets or pellet-like droppings, a lot of which will contain grass and other sort of herbaceous material. The deer pellets on the right-hand side are fresh, and you can tell that they look almost like little raisinets. Now, urine is also a way to identify animals in the wild. Urine is liquid waste left by the animals, sometimes in specific areas for territorial purposes. Urine tends to have a strong musky smell to it, and there are certain smells associated with certain animals. Now we're going to play Name That Scat. If you look down on the bottom left, we've got pellets. Pellets, remember, mean your herbivores. So deer, moose will all fall under that category. Then we have, next to it, we have plop. And a plop is usually from a bear or a buffalo. Sometimes they can be large in size, and oftentimes will contain seeds, fruits, and other pieces of food from that individual animal. Large tubes are also indicated by your canine and your feline. Canines obviously will be larger than your feline, and geese even have tubular droppings. Now, geese also contain white material that's referred to as guano, and that is because it is from a bird, and birds tend to have guano in their scat. Small tubes, really tiny tubes, as you can see on the right hand side, are your rodents, so your squirrels and your smaller rodent-like creatures. And then anything that has white in it, as mentioned before, birds in particular, but also your amphibians and your reptiles will show up white in their droppings. Aside from scat and urine and trails and tracks, we can also look at eat marks. Eat marks are a great way to identify different organisms in the wild. Chewed sticks, woodpecker holes, marks on twigs, beetle trails, insects, eat marks, they all are good indicators of an animal in the area. The top left-hand picture shows us beetle larvae. If you remove the bark from a tree, you can find their little trails where they journey underneath that bark. The middle upper picture shows you a piece of a tree that's been broken off by beaver. And beaver tend to make those pointed sort of eat marks as they gnaw down their tree and move it to their home or their lodges. On the right hand side, in the upper right hand corner, we've got holes that are drilled by woodpeckers. Northern flickers in particular like to drill all the way across the tree, as you can see in the picture. Bottom left hand side is another picture of a beaver activity, and then bottom right hand side is the activity of a deer. Deer tend to like little low brush material, twigs, and you can see that they've chewed off some of the greener herbs that they found in the area. Another way to identify different organisms are through their homes. Holes in trees, holes in the ground, holes in the snow, nests, cocoons, galls, wasp nests, dens, and beds are all identifiable if you really know where to look. The top left-hand side shows a chipmunk hole. Many of you probably have this in your yard somewhere. The middle diagram up top shows us a squirrel's nest. Many times squirrels will gather leaves and put them high in the trees, particularly oak trees, because they leave their leaves on quite a bit, and they will make a home out of those leaves in the tree. Right hand side, you are familiar with the woodpecker and how they drill a hole into the side of a tree, and that's where they typically will nest. Bottom left, a bird's nest. Probably a robin of some sort or a sparrow. They will find places to put twigs and grasses and other things that they find, thread or other materials, and they use that to build their nest. Middle picture on the bottom, you've got a black bear. They usually create what we call dens, any sort of hollow underneath logs or stones, a place that they can hibernate all winter. And then on the right hand side, we've got what we call a gall, which is a nest for insects. Typically wasps or bees or other insects will use that means, attach it to the tree, and that's where they lay their eggs or build their homes. Another great way to identify different animals in the area are through territorial markings. The deer rubs and scrapes are often found this time of year, usually in the fall when it becomes the rutting season. So the deer will rub on trees, as you can see in the right-hand picture, and they will do scrapes in the ground. Oftentimes you'll find it in areas where the dirt is exposed and you've got the leaves that are scraped away from that surface. They do this to leave their scent and mark their territory, as you can see in the buck that's rubbing against the tree on the left-hand side. Another territorial marking occurs with the beavers. The beavers will create mounds of mud typically and rub one of their glands, it's called a castor gland, on that mound to mark their territory as well. So other beaver or other animals in the area know that it has already been marked by that individual. And lastly, we have sounds and smells. This includes the rustling of trees and leaves as you're sitting in your sit spot, perhaps. Bird songs and bird calls are very, very important because we oftentimes hear birds, but we very rarely are able to catch a glimpse of them. Woodpeckers drilling are also a good indication that you have a bird nearby. Wolves and coyotes howling. They usually do this at night and typically are using that for territorial or for communication purposes. Also, musky smell from urine or glands are a good way to identify that an animal has been in that area recently. So when you're out at your sit spot, when you're out looking for these organisms at Cardigan, you really want to keep all of your sounds, your smells, and your sight also in context, because you will be looking for all of these things and trying to identify those common organisms in the area. Top left hand side, you can see your chipmunk. Your chipmunks will make a little squeaking sound, for example. So if you hear that, you know that you have a chipmunk in the area. And the skunk in the middle, Pepe Le Pew, you'll be able to smell him before you see him in any event. So make sure that you are aware of those things out there so that you can best identify these organisms. Thank you very much, and don't forget to complete your whisk below.